Hello, everyone, and thanks for joining us this evening at the Gnomon School of Visual Effects, Games, and Animation. We're streaming live from Hollywood tonight, so hello to everyone watching on live stream on Facebook. We're happy to have you all with us for our very special VFX Heroes panel discussion. Before we get started, I actually want to give a shout out to our many Gnomon students and alumni that have been listed as finalists today in the Rookies 2017 Awards. We have finalists competing for Rookie of the Year in the Animation, Next Gen Gaming, VFX, and Photography categories. Stephen Cunan's short film, The Model, is fighting it out for Film of the Year, and we also have 7 students up for internships and scholarships. So I just wanted to send a huge congrats and massive good luck to all of those that made it through to this round. So kudos. So tonight, we've brought together an incredible lineup of talent to discuss the art of creating award-winning visual effects for some of our most beloved TV shows. From your right to left, we have Tim Jacobsen, over on the right, VFX producer and co-founder of VES Effects, which has offices in LA, New York, and Vancouver. Tim is an Emmy award-winning producer who's worked on over 80 TV shows, including Mad Men, American Horror Story, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., and so very many more. So let's have a round of applause for Tim, please. Next on the right, we have Aladino Debert. I hope I said that right. Did I say it wrong? You can correct me in a minute. VFX Supervisor at Digital Domain on Starz Network's pirate adventure Black Sails. Aladino won a VES Award for Outstanding Supporting Visual Effects in a photoreal episode for his work on Black Sails, and previously worked in DD's feature film division. So let's have another big round of applause for Aladino. Next, we have Steve Kullback, VFX producer at HBO on Game of Thrones. Steve's been working on Game of Thrones from as early as season 2, so he's literally grown up with the dragons, and I believe was also a stand-in for a dragon at one point. He's won 5 Emmy Awards for his work on the fantasy hit series, and is even the namesake for Mance Rayder's manservant at the Battle of Castle Black. So let's have a round of applause for Steve. And moderating tonight's panel, on the left here, we have the award-winning journalist Susan Karlin, who writes about the nexus of science, technology, and arts, and has a fondness for the sci-fi genre and comics. She's a regular contributor to Fast Company magazine, where she covers VFX and production design, has written for Forbes, Wired, Discover, the New York Times, many, many more. She also moderates panels for Comic-Con, and we're very excited to have her here tonight. So let's have a round of applause for Susan. I'd quickly like to thank our event sponsor, Lenovo, for helping us to bring these free events to you. Tonight's presentation is powered by Lenovo and Intel technology, which our students also use here on campus, so thanks for that. Actually, if you're here on the stage, we have a special 20% discount code from Lenovo that's exclusive for Gnomon attendees, so that's relevant to the ThinkPad P-Series and ThinkStation products on Lenovo.com. So if you didn't see that code as you checked in, let us know, and we can let you know what the code is on your way out. We'll have time for audience questions, hopefully. For those with questions here on the stage, please raise your hand and we'll bring the mic around to you. Please make sure you wait for the mic so our guests up on the stage can hear you properly. For those watching online, please submit your questions on the live stream live chat or on Twitter using #Gnomon. While we do love all our Facebook viewers equally as much, it's just so difficult for us to keep up with comments on Facebook. So please be sure to tweet or live chat any questions to make sure they're received by the team. We also have some cool prizes tonight, courtesy of Digital Domain and VES Effects. We have some caps, t-shirts, a rucksack. We have a goodie bag from Digital Domain. There's lots of cool stuff. So Courtney will come up at the end of the event and draw those raffle tickets. So hold on to your raffle tickets and make sure you stay till the end for that. If you're watching online, we'll have a 1-month subscription up for grabs to the Gnomon Workshop Training Library. So to enter for that, simply share tonight's live stream event URL on Twitter using #Gnomon, and we'll select a winner at random at the end. If you're watching on Facebook, to find the URL, head to livestream.com/Gnomon. So I'm going to hand over now. So I hope you all enjoyed tonight's discussion, and if anyone would like to tour the campus after tonight's event ends, please let me know, and I'll be happy to show you around. So let's have a huge round of applause, and we'll hand over to Susan. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. So I was so excited when they asked me to moderate because I am fascinated by VFX. And if I wasn't moderating, I'd probably be sitting in the audience listening to the panel. I hope you're as excited as I am with these guys. So before we get into the nuts and bolts of everything, I want to go down the line and have you each just briefly talk about what your current job entails and your journey to it. How you got there. So, would you like to go first?
Sure.
Steve? Okay.
So, I'm producing the visual effects on Game of Thrones, and the visual effects producer is somewhat like a building contractor. You come together with the script, which would be like the blueprints, and you work with the architect and the client, who would be the directors and the writers and the producers, and you put together the team that will ultimately do the work. So it'll be oftentimes breaking down a script to see what it involves, and then how you come about to create and tell the story in a way that fulfills the vision of the folks that you're working for.
Okay, that was the correct answer. Very good.
Thank you.
Go ahead. Aladino?
Can you hear me? Yes. Well, I'm a creative director at Digital Domain. It's a little different than VFX Supervisor because I also direct commercials for our live-action Sidekick mothership. In the case of TV work, I work as a visual effects supervisor, which means that I'm in charge of on-set supervision, supervising the teams that do the visual effects work, both for TV and for commercials, and making sure that I put together the teams, hire people like you guys and gals. And I do I still do a lot of pitch work and on-the-box work, so I still sit and do a lot of the work myself. And you mentioned how we came to do what we do.
Oh, your journey. Oh, Steve, you didn't get a chance to talk about that. Oh, my God.
I'll jump in and say that. Well,
we'll come back to you.
I actually studied architecture first before I got into visual effects. But I was always a film buff and sort of kind of by accident ended up doing animation, and I ended up I changed a little bit my career and I studied computer graphics, and this is how I ended up where I am.
Oh, wow. So like, do you fix things around the house?
All
like
the time.
Still?
He's very handy.
Okay. Tim, why don't you go, and then I'll circle back around to...
Sure, and my job's probably a little bit even different than both of yours. I'm on the facility side, so my official title is executive producer, but I'm also the founder, or one of the 3 founders of VES FX. So we've got companies in LA, in New York, in Vancouver. And so we're dealing with many, many different TV shows. I'm overseeing other producers, and those producers are then working on individual shows and perhaps working with both of you, depending on the projects that we're working on. And basically my job is to make sure that the clients are happy, and I make sure that the employees are happy and sort of I'm kind of the glue that holds together, I think, the whole process on the facility side. My journey has been a little bit, I went to a liberal arts college, and so I certainly didn't study visual effects. I went straight out of college and I started in television news. And after that, I was editing together things and decided, well, this is a pretty cool thing to do. My sister and brother were living in Los Angeles at the time. They said, why don't you come on out? And I packed up a truck and drove out here, and I started at a vault position, and basically it was during a time when visual effects were just starting to become popular, and I kind of noticed that it was something that was pretty cool to get into. And so the last, I guess 10, almost 20 years now, it's sort of just an evolution of my position. And finally in 2008, got together with 2 other partners, and that's when we decided to form our own company. And that's gone from 3 people to, we've got about 300 people now.
Oh, wow. And
Yeah.
then Steve, you said that you went to Pratt?
No,
You went to
that
Pratt.
was Aladino.
What did you... You went to Hofstra.
I went to
right,
Hofstra.
As a...
Studied production at university. But I also started in television news. One of my first gigs was editing news and working in...
Oh, cool. Two recovering
master,
journalists. There's hope for me.
I don't know if I'd call myself a journalist, but it was an interesting way to understand production and editing and see how things come together. From that, I went on and did industrials. I made videos for American Express on how to answer the phone, which is very glamorous. Nice. And then a buddy of mine who was also doing that and writing and directing industrials created a show called Are You Afraid of the Dark? And he hired me to come aboard and oversee the post-production. And there were these visual effects. And I would flip through the scripts, and we did a take once on The Legend of Sleepy Hollow. And the Headless Horseman chases the boy across the bridge and reaches the bridge and explodes. And I'm reading, how the hell am I going to do this? And just started breaking it down like a puzzle, and that was my responsibility, was to deliver on the visual effects.
So your first job was basically scaring children.
Scaring children, yes, exactly.
So, yeah, you can come from anywhere and do this, apparently. So,
True.
So I know we have a lot of fans of the shows here, and so I want to sort of get stuck into how you, we'll break down some of the scenes that you guys did and how you achieved them. So Steve, again, we'll start with you. You are known as the Uncle of Dragons. Is that what people call you?
No.
Oh, okay.
No, but there is the Mother of Dragons, and
I know, but that's
my visual effects.
I didn't make that up. Who said that? Lynette, did you call
somebody
it that?
called me the Father of Dragons,
Fathers
and
of
I
Dragons,
think that
okay.
title really belongs to the visual effects supervisor, who is the colleague that I work with. We're a team, sort of like a director and a producer.
All right.
The visual effects supervisor and the visual effects producer will work hand in hand. The supervisor is the creative, the designer, the one who realizes from a clean page what it'll look like. And the producer is the one who's kind of managing the resources and the budget and the schedule and the time and the crew. So that's sort of the relationship. So I fancy as the Father of Dragons.
Okay.
So I kind of see myself as the uncle.
Okay. Or the crazy cousin.
Or the crazy cousin.
Some relation.
Exactly.
So the thing that was interesting to me was that you actually ground the character in reality. You study the behavior, you incorporate the behavior of animals and thermodynamics and movement and anatomy.
We do a lot of research.
Okay.
When you're animating a character and having to bring to life something that is completely lifeless, you need to start somewhere as a foundation for what this thing should look like, should behave like, and in the case of dragons, we, of course, looked at what others had done, but we really focused a lot of attention to the animal kingdom, and we looked at Komodo dragons, and we looked at lizards, and because these suckers fly around and are pretty fierce, we looked at birds of prey. And the thing that's kind of important is to not anthropomorphize these characters, meaning you don't want to embody it with human qualities, because that's our initial nature, is whenever we're creating the behavior of something that's completely imagined, we start with how we behave. Which, by the way, is one of the reasons why creating CG creatures like wolves and dogs is very difficult, because we're all so familiar with how they behave that any cue that says this sucker is not real, because we're so attuned to how they act, it's very difficult to pull that off. Faking things we know well is very difficult to pull off, but characters that we don't know that well, like dragons, we don't know how a dragon behaves unless we've seen it in other movies. So we really look at how creatures in the real world act.
Okay, and you use tennis balls to help
Well,
with
you
perspective?
know, if Aladino here is, you know, sitting on the dais next to a dragon, he's got to have something to look at. So sometimes it's a tennis ball on a stand, sometimes it's a tennis ball on a stick.
Yeah.
You need to give someone a proper eye line so that when they're performing opposite this completely imagined character, they know which way to look. We did a scene in the, we called it Dragon Daycare, when Danny first brings the dragons down into the salt mine below, below Marine to lock them away. When they come barreling down the stairs, Joe, the visual effects supervisor, and I were holding dragon heads that were modeled to be the same size as our dragon heads on the end of sticks. And we came running down the stairs, and we sort of kind of puppeteered what these dragons ought to have been doing in Joe's mind. And so that the camera would be able to have something to follow that we would then emulate again as a clean plate or paint us out. And I got made fun of because there were some photos taken on the day where I really got into it, and I was perhaps a little more serious than some people thought I should be.
You can never be too serious about
That's
dragons.
what I said.
You know what? They're wrong.
It was a performance,
and
I was giving it my all.
Yeah, I'm signing with you. So was that your career as a dragon stand-in, or did you actually like move like Jagger? I mean,
No, I didn't. No,
You did, like, the chicken dance?
I do want to wear that suit to a party someday.
Oh, okay.
pretty
I mean,
cool.
is there like a dragon demonstration you want to do for the
No.
audience tonight? No? Okay. Because it's going to be immortalized on film.
Yeah, no thank you.
All right. I was hoping for blackmailing material. But
Oh, there's plenty, believe me.
Okay. And then the Battle of the Bastards scene, which was
We call it Bob. It's true.
Which was, I mean, I looked at this and I went, God, I'm exhausted just watching it. And then my second question was, how many calls from PETA did you get about the horses dying? So how did you achieve that epic battle?
It's an amazing collaboration. There are a lot of departments who are involved in this. The director is a fellow named Miguel Sapochnik, who also did Hard Home. And he spent a lot of time thinking about it and figuring out how this thing should be choreographed. We did a lot of previs, so this scene was quite extensively prevised, and someone went back and put a reel together side by side with the show and the previs, and it's spot on.
Wow.
It's really remarkable how spot on it is. And part of that is because we don't really have the time to wing it. We have a very finite period of time. I think we shot it in 19 days, which for a television show, to do a sequence is enormous. There are whole movies that are shot in less than 19 days. But be that as it may, we were out in a field that was basically a large farm field. And we had our Starks and we had our Boltons, and they were all the same dudes and the same horses, and they were just dressed up one day as Starks and the next day as Boltons. And we just shot them and had green screens flying around so that we could bring them behind and get some separation, but there was an enormous amount of roto. And there was a company called Allura down in Melbourne, Australia, who had done a scene from A Million Ways to Die in the West, a Seth MacFarlane movie. And the scene was a bunch of horses hitched up at a hitching post, and one falls over and they domino and fall on each other. And it was so realistic and so extraordinary that we asked them to do a test for us. And they did work that was up close and personal with those horses that, you know, we were out there shooting horses, and obviously you can't shoot horses clashing with each other, but we had a horse run through, and then at the appointed moment, it would run through and then take a tumble. The horse wranglers are really talented, and they can do marvelous things, and these horses are trick horses that are trained to do this. So they would run through, hit a mark, and take a fall, and then we'd have a CG horse come in and spear it from the other side, so that when you put it together, it looks like they're really coming together in a very violent clash. And for all of the in-camera photography we did, and we did a lot, when we were getting back the shots and we were looking at them, there were times when we could not tell what was ours and what was theirs, what they had actually created. It was pretty extraordinary.
You totally should have had that horse domino scene in there. That would have been awesome in the battle. Might have taken you out of it.
Battle,
maybe
for the comedy version of that scene.
Exactly.
So, okay, Aladino and Black Sails. Oh, by the way, I covered this thing called the TCA, the Television Critics Association press tour, and it's when all of the actors come and meet the journalists. And so there were all these like Black Sails actors there when they came, and they're gorgeous and cut, and they're long flowing hair, and they're really macho and virile. And then you meet them on the buffet line, and they're like, do you have non-gluten rolls with that? So, so the mystery was just blown. But anyway, the thing that, that stands out for me, and I could be totally wrong, but it's rare. The thing that stands out for me with that in terms of visual effects are three things. The level of detail in taking a historical location and then building upon it. And then the second thing was sort of the weight and movement of the ships and in the water and the billowing of the sails. To me, those ships are almost like another character. In there.
We definitely treated them like that, yeah.
They
Okay.
Well, to your first point, I guess.
So talk about those,
the historical stuff was interesting because, of course, there's no photographs of, late 1700s. So all we had were, drawings and kind of art stuff that gave us some idea of particularly like Charleston and North Carolina. So we had to kind of mix a little bit of kind of gut feeling and design and try to age the buildings. And, again, we had historical reference but written, so we had to kind of interpret what the historical reference was in order to create it. That was a bit more, I guess, standard, visual effects work as far as I'm concerned. The ships on the water is something that you said, kind of doing something that doesn't exist, such as a dragon, has its own challenges, of course, because you have to give it a personality that you don't know what it is, so that in itself is tricky. In the case of water, we are like a dog. We are so in tune to the way water behaves that is probably hands down the hardest thing I've ever had to do.
I've heard that water and fire are the two hardest things to do.
Yeah, I would say water more than fire these days. And also because, water from a visual effects standpoint, it doesn't scale well. So, it's not the same to do a glass of water than to do an ocean. And it was, I would say, particularly for the last season that we did, half of our team was working in water. I mean, and the water, kind of dictated what the ships would do and how they would behave and how they would move. And to your point about weight, we did a lot of research as far as, Archimedes' effect and, how much a ship displaces water and how much that would move it and what would, how a ship would behave if it's just in calm water versus an ocean that is choppy but not a lot of wind versus a hurricane, right? The work that we did last season was for a ship gets stuck on a typhoon and a hurricane, and it was extremely tricky to do. So we did a lot of research. We looked a lot of, the Greatest Catch type shows, where you see really big ships. And what's amazing about the ocean is that it really cares not for size of ships. I mean, it would move. I mean, you see enormous tankers doing this, and you can't believe they're actually staying straight. So in the case of our ship, I think the biggest ship that we did technically was, I think, 220 feet long. So we did a lot of trial and error and a lot of, look dev and development to try to figure out exactly how heavy that ship would be and how it would behave in a storm. And that included, obviously, the sails. The sails, the ropes, anything that had to do with the behavior, kind of the naturalistic stuff of the ships. And as far as a character, we really did treat them as a character. I mean, I think that we created maybe 15 or 18 ships for the show, but I think only 2 or 3 are really seen super close up. And for those, we spent months. I mean, we did months doing modeling and texturing and kind of simulation for the sails, simulation for the ropes. Actually, the ropes were trickier than the sails.
Really?
Yes. Yeah, because it's a kind of trickle-down effect, right? So the sails is a sail. It's one piece of, or multiple pieces of
But you still have
fabric.
to get it to billow.
And you do, but you can simulate it as one piece, whereas the ropes depend on what the sails are doing, right?
Okay.
So, and at the same time, the sails depend on the ropes because they're tied and they're stuck, and then sometimes, in the storm, one would blow, it would rip open, and
And do you have any kind of algorithm that sort of mathematically connects them, so when a sail or a movement does X, the rope will do Y?
Sure, but in my experience,
Or do you just make it up as you go
No,
along?
I mean, in my experience, the algorithm ends up being the artist,
Okay.
I mean, it's, the simulation takes you so far, and then you look at it, it's like, nah.
Okay.
So, and the same with water. I mean, there's, software right now, Houdini, softwares like that that are really, really advanced and great at simulations, but, there's, to your point before, there's a line in which reality meets fantasy and art direction, and, and our job, as a creative is to find that line and figure out what looks best, right? Sometimes the most realistic thing does not look the best, and then you force it, or you make it slightly less realistic, or a little, so you have to play with that, and that comes with experience of doing it, and working with a team, and working with the clients, and figuring out, that formula. So it ends up being, the artist, really.
Reality is a good place to start.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. But
Which is a fun thing to say,
to add to that, it's I think any effect that you do, it cannot take the viewer out of the show. It can't distract. We do so many shows like that
Totally.
if the visual effects takes the viewer out of it, then
You fail.
yeah.
Of course.
So, let's, so Tim, as long as we're on the topic of reality,
Okay.
I know you've had brushes with it on occasion. So, with the what's interesting about what you're going to talk about tonight is you've worked on Mad Men,
Correct.
and then you've worked on American Horror Story.
Sure.
And so, what are the differences between working on VFX for a realistic drama compared to working on a high concept genre drama? And how do you keep reality consistent with each of those types of series?
I mean, one of the most important things I just said is one, whether it's high concept or if it's invisible effects as we call it, they can't take the viewer out. So something like Mad Men, we were constantly working with the production designers, with the producers, and they were very meticulous as far as if they're driving a car down a street, and they might shoot this in downtown LA, every little detail they would pick out from the backplate. Like, that street lamp wouldn't have existed in 1952, or that street light would not, or that street sign would have been green and white and not blue and white. So constantly we were having to go through and actually correct plates, remove, add, and you get some pride with that, though, because Mad Men really did a fantastic job of recreating 1950s and 1960s historical, backdrops. And so we would also work with the production designers. They would do as much as they possibly could, and then we would add and take away as needed.
And you were telling, when we spoke on the phone earlier, you were telling me about, with American Horror Story, how you worked on the conjoined twins and Twisty the Clown.
Yeah.
And so, and it was fascinating to hear how you did it. So, walk the audience through how you did those characters.
Well, Sarah Paulson actually played conjoined twins, and I think this was for Freak Show. It was about 2 years ago. And so this was, something that Ryan Murphy thought of doing, and he said, nobody's ever done it in television before. How are we going to do this? So we sat down and tried to figure out what would be the limitations that we could do. There were some movement limitations, but Sarah had to actually play both characters, so she would actually get dressed for the one character, play it, and then we would flop her. and shoot the other plate, and then we would do several takes of this, and then we would actually join them together using a lot of blending techniques. And it took a lot of warping, blending, and the character really couldn't do a lot of movement like this. It was going to create a lot of issues. It was going to create a lot of issues. But we had artists doing a ton of rotoscope, a ton of blending for that. And it's probably like the first time I can think of that they actually had a conjoined character that was for 13 episodes, played by kind of a major actress. So it was a big deal, and Ryan Murphy was very, very, very concerned about her looking real, going back to, they didn't want people staring at her going, I wonder how they did that. They just wanted to accept her as the character. And there were definitely takes that might have been a better acting take that we had to make compromises for.
Oh, that's
but
interesting.
luckily we didn't have to do that very much. So that was definitely a challenge. And Twisty, you know, that's a character that, unlike the dragon, we wanted to make human. I mean, he was human, but he was kind of a nasty sort of killer that once his mask came off and the story came out of why, you know, he lost his jaw, he also had to speak, so we had to do some animation with him. So we did a full model of the jaw, and we did match moving, lots of tracking on the face, and then it was just sort of blending it and animating the character who kind of spoke in a very strange manner.
And you are also working closely with the special effects makeup department with that?
Yeah, absolutely. Special effects, makeup, and Erin is really, she's fantastic. Would do as much makeup as she possibly could, and then we would take it the rest of the way. You know, in the case of Twisty the Clown, when he had his mask on, there wasn't really much we had to do. It was only the reveal of when he would take the mask off. So Erin would do all of the work when the mask was on, and then when the mask came off, you know, visual effects would step in.
And, you know, today's audiences are so used to the spectacular effects in films, and you don't have the kind of budgets that films do, but you have those expectations. So how do you marry that? How do you rise to those challenges of appealing to an audience that's very discerning about effects now?
It's a lot of planning. I mean, we sit down with the clients. You know, as soon as we see an outline or a script and they're writing in some really, really big items, visual effects, and we know that they don't have a big budget, we sit down and figure out, well, how can we bring your vision out here? It may involve just reducing the amount of cuts. Let's do a wide shot and let's sell that it's this country with a fantastic matte painting, put our money there, and then go tight and medium. And the audience then believes that, you know, those characters might be at that location. You don't have to continually show them in these great, big, wide shots that cost a lot of money.
How do you guys manage those challenges? The same, or do you have other ways of doing it?
You know, we try and keep pace with outstanding film effects by doing outstanding effects for television. I mean, we honestly go about the process in the same way as any large feature would. You know, we don't always have the money. We never often have the time, but we do have the same people, and we work a lot harder and a lot faster than we might otherwise if we had a more generous allowance. But you know, it's all about planning. I mean, if you know that you have a limited amount of time and a limited amount of money, and sometimes the limitations are not just how long is your schedule, how long is your budget, but how long do you have to shoot it? There is a very finite amount of production time, and that's why previs and concept art and storyboards and really trying to understand and realize what this thing looks like before you put it on its legs, so that you're not wasting time designing while you're supposed to be gathering the very specific pieces you need. We do a mountain of what we call tech viz, where we've done our previs scene, and now we need to figure out shot by shot, all right, now we've done that, what's it going to take to do? And sometimes you go off in a path and you don't realize that you've invented a creature that's flying through going 1,200 miles an hour. And then you realize, oh, we might have to back that off a bit. Or, the production crane, in order to make that arc, needs to be going 75 miles an hour. Well, we know the grips are not going to be able to push the crane 75 miles an hour. We're going to have to make some changes. So when we go through the previs, we kind of break it down step by step, and we come up with essentially a playbook. And we have a manual of diagrams and charts and instructions, basically, for when we're out there on location and we have to shoot this particular shot now, and what are all the pieces that are needed to do that. And that, gives us a leg up.
Yeah. I would just add, too, that some of the most successful shows that we've worked on, they've always prevised or storyboarded. So when they go into editorial, they actually have something to slug in as well. So even if it's very early on in the process, it certainly helps the producers to sort of visualize what their cut is going to be. And shows that do that early in the process just are so much more successful.
Sure. I think that, sorry, I mean, to some of your points.
No, go on.
I think we're living a bit of a golden age of visual effects for television. I mean, I joke all the time about, I call the Game of Thrones effect. Shows like Black Sails, I think, wouldn't have been possible if it wasn't for, this idea of a show like Game of Thrones that, took what's best of, film visual effects and production and brought it into television, which is something that a few years ago was simply not possible. And I think that, many of the things that we're developing and we're working on, and we had to do for something like Black Sails, comes from this sophistication that the viewers have these days, like you said, that they expect a level that is simply, I mean, if you look at the stuff that we were doing 15, 20 years ago for television, it's laughable, right? Like, yeah. But people were fine with that.
Hey,
don't knock Batman.
No, but and I worked in several of those shows, and it was fine. I mean, that's what you were doing. In something like Black Sails, and it's another thing that it's, to your point of previs and stuff, one thing that we had to do a lot because of this idea that if the effect suddenly became an effect, we failed. Like, the idea was that no one was paying attention to what we were doing. I mean, we were trying to tell a story about ships and oceans and old towns and cannons and destruction, but if in any moment we were like, that looks fake, obviously you lose the viewer, right? So, for instance, cinematography became super important for us because we very carefully try to keep everything within reality. So if your camera couldn't move as fast as someone had done in previs, we would not do it. And we went as far as, our camera rig, for those who work in animation, we had a little dinghy modeled with a tripod and a camera, and we would let it float on our CG ocean to see what that camera would do if it was in the ocean. Then we would take that and we're like, well, that's nice. Let's try to stabilize it a little bit. But I mean, we at all times try to keep it as real as possible because for us, to your point of invisible effects, that was our role. I mean, we wanted to tell a story that we were doing visual effects simply because there was no other way of doing it, not because anybody wanted to do visual effects. If we could have gone to in the middle of a typhoon and shoot with a pirate ship, we would have done that. And you can't, right? So.
And one of the things that I noticed too is it's the most subtle thing. Like, we also worked a little bit on Black Sails as well. It's just the most subtle thing. You just know when it's wrong. and you were talking about animals. Like, it's animating any sort of animals, even a dragon. It's like if their muscles don't move in a certain way, it just doesn't look right.
Yeah.
I've seen somebody do an elephant before. They were trying to animate it, and the animator just couldn't get the muscle action correct. And sometimes it's somebody who comes in and sort of understands the muscle groups and how they're supposed to to move. And when they get it right, you just know.
We did a mammoth a few years
That's
ago,
right.
Yeah.
and one of the things we brainstormed when we were trying to figure out how the hell are we going to do this is
Wait, a dragon was easy, but a mammoth was problem?
well, we had mastered the dragon to a degree by then. We had not done a mammoth before, and it had to be a giant riding a mammoth, no less.
Okay.
And then the mammoth had to be on fire, so it was like
In an ocean, bobbing.
anything else,
with her-
guys? And there's a gal who specializes in dressing up elephants like mammoths. Go figure. And it's
Wow.
it's something
Talk about
that
specializing.
we very seriously looked
How
at,
did
dressing
you
up an
find-
elephant like a mammoth and shooting it in front of
How
a
do
green
you
screen.
how do you Google woman who dresses up
Yeah, well, sure.
elephants?
You start, you
Wow.
know, you have friends, they talk to each other. But, it's like you need to shoot a bear. There's
Okay.
people who, have bears that they shoot.
dress up like
And,
mammoths. Okay.
But one of the most important things that we do to try and achieve the realism, because it's all about, obviously it's telling the story is number one, but achieving the realism starts with having elements that are real. So whenever we need to be in an environment, if that environment can exist, we shoot it. We go around the Battle of the Bastards playing field is essentially a backdrop of Iceland. It's the north, it's up near Winterfell, and so we went and shot 1 million plates in Iceland, and every shot has Iceland in the background and trees that are blended in to match it. You have a high angle, you have an army of 100,000 come marching out of the forest. Well, get your 80 guys and gals out there and march them out of the forest from a high angle so that you can see exactly what that looks like, so that when you're scattering out your CG army, you've got something to reference. We did, a horde of Dothrakis going through the Red Waste. We shot a dude on a horse from a high angle in the desert going through the shot so that we knew exactly what that looked like, and that provides the best frame of reference because it's real. And until it looks like that, we know that the artists haven't quite nailed it yet.
Do you start at the very beginning with the writers? Like, as the writers are coming up with the outlines, do you meet with them at that point and say, okay, this is how we can enhance the scene, or we can't do it this complicated, you'll need to change your idea?
There, at times. I mean, early on, when, in the lean years, when, things were not quite as well known and established, and we might not have had the time to pull off certain things, and somebody said, we need to do X, Y, Z. We said, what, let's save that for next year. I actually have an example that I can't tell you because we're actually doing it this year. So that kind of screwed up my story, but in any event, you get the idea.
I mean,
go ahead.
just to add a little to that, I mean, we've had shows that we've worked with the writers. We've shown them various reels of work that we've done that might be related to the type of storylines. And they've actually then written some of the things that they liked in our reel as sort of a collaborative way of sort of, wow, that looked really cool. Let's, one example was an aircraft carrier, a full CG aircraft carrier. They hadn't really thought about actually doing that because they thought they had to go onto an aircraft carrier. But they were able to get a full CG aircraft carrier with planes landing on it, crew running on board, and it's just something that they didn't even think they were able to accomplish.
What show is that for?
That was actually for Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D.
Okay.
Yeah, so Mark Kullback, who's the visual effects supervisor, he saw that on our reel and thought it was really cool and showed it to the writers, and sure enough, it was in one of the episodes a few episodes later. So
sometimes you'll give them ideas, or you'll enhance their imaginations.
yeah, absolutely, and I think also you can have some sort of budget discussions at that point too, so everybody can have a sort of an understanding of what it's going to take to put it into their show.
That's the real discussion.
That's the scary one.
At the outline script stage. Is like, whoa.
Okay. How are we doing?
Feedback.
Hang on. Wait, do we need to go to the hand mic? No, we're good?
Sorry,
okay.
got carried away.
That's okay.
But seriously,
Get out.
I don't know if that's mine.
the discussion that, that really happens at the outline phase.
I still hear echo. We still, is it, do you want the hand mic? Is it your audio that's getting, you're fine? Okay. All right. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Anywho, so you get to the outline stage and they've written, there's giants riding mammoths down there, and ultimately you end up in a room going, all right, guys, we have X amount of money, we have this voluminous amount of shots, and something's going to have to give. And so it's, that going through the process.
You know what'd be awesome is like next week and we see this mammoth in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Like, I got this great idea from this panel.
In Black Sails, we had a little bit of a different situation. It was interesting. The first season we worked for the show, we kind of came in halfway through the production, so we were essentially helping them figure out, how to do the things that they wanted to do. And by the time the second season came around, it was more like they would come with crazy, Eric Henry, which is the studio VFX, and Taryn, which is the producer. They would come with the scripts, and rather than say, yeah, I think we can do this, we would come up with even crazier ideas because, as an artist, you're trying to kind of challenge yourself and come up with stuff that you haven't done before because otherwise it can become tedious, right? Even if it's a lot of work, it can become tedious. So we had all this like brainstorming sessions with them trying to come up with crazier ways of doing the shots because we thought it would be more interesting visually. Then my producer would try to talk money, right? But, which was the second conversation. But I was trying to stay away from that and just, just look at the
Then your
visual.
supervisor would bring in the Xanax and say, guys.
Then the show says, but Aladino said we could do that.
which happened more than once. Yeah.
And then a lot of times you'll find ways to, is it true that you'll find ways to amortize certain characters or certain effects over the course of
absolutely.
A series?
Yeah, in fact, for instance, there's many of the ships that we created for the second season of Black Sails that were used on the third and the fourth season. So it's, with some tweaks here and there, but yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and that's something you kind of work with the producers on. For many of the, the ships for Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. might have been a development task that we put all to episode 1 and then other things were cut down, or we would amortize it over quite a few.
Yeah, and to that point, not only specific things that you built or you model, or whatever, but even the know-how, when, dealing with water, right? I would say by the midway through the second season that we're doing for Black Sails, we had certain processes down. And we could do certain shots a lot faster and a lot cheaper. So we ended up doing a lot more shots than we originally set out to do because we figured out a way to do it cheaply, which we didn't know 6 months earlier. It's just that as we went through the process of learning to do something we hadn't done before, we came up with all these different ways of doing it, and it became cheaper for the clients and cheaper for us. So we were able to do more work. Yeah.
Gotcha. So now we've come to the point where you guys get to tell them how they become you. So what advice and opinions do you have for people who are interested in careers working for visual effects in general, and TV specifically? I don't know if it's the same advice or if there's advice that's peculiar to TV.
I'll start. Not anymore. I think that, to the point that we were making before, I think visual effects is gotten to a point in which it's just a visual medium. Besides, how do you separate Netflix from CBS and Amazon and HBO? It's all, right? It's all the same, at least it aspires to be the same quality, right? So I think that from a standpoint of an artist, I think the most important thing is to stick to your guns and really look at it from an artistic standpoint. Try not to become an operator, because that's what separates, I think, the people that become successful in what we do versus the people that, although work in the industry, maybe don't get to do the things that they would like to. And I think that attention to detail, it requires to be a little bit obsessive. I think that anybody who's in the industry has to be a little bit obsessive. But I think obsession to the craft is a very important thing. And I think when you're starting, and I see a lot of reels from you guys. I mean, we've hired tons of people from Gnomon over the years at Digital Domain. I'm always more impressed when I see one great piece than 10 okay ones. So I think that if you're preparing a reel or something like that, and if you're trying to be an animator or whatever you're trying to do, I think that it's, for us from a creative standpoint, I'm much more impressed if I see one piece that blows my mind and I can see the breadth of work that was put into it, that if you're trying to show a little bit of everything. Yeah, I can simulate, I can animate a car, I can do a human that sort of dances, because I think that the industry has gotten sophisticated enough that a lot of people can do that, right? When I started, and I started at Pratt 25 years ago, there was a handful of schools in the country that taught visual effects, and now there's a ton, which means that there's a ton of people that come out of those schools. So I think that the best thing you can do, from my humble opinion, is create a piece that kind of shows the best you can do, even if it's a 10-second piece. That's what I think.
Okay.
I would add to that too. I mean, we have a ton of people that come to Fuse and want a job, and what I really find to be inspiring is somebody who's got a lot of passion for what they want to do, and also what you mentioned, detailed as well. Being an artist, I think, requires you to sit on a box in a very dark room, sometimes working on a couple little details for a long period of time, and having the willingness to want it to be perfect. I've had many artists come through and they will rush through shots. They're happy to get through 5 shots in a day versus the 1 shot, but I'll be honest, I'd rather have the 1 shot done perfect than 5 shots that I have to give technical notes to. So it's really combining artistry with detail and making sure you care about what you do.
Yeah, and I'll add one thing, and it's the ability not to compromise. I think that often, especially with people that supervise and supervisors, at least I do a lot. At times I'm half producing as well, and it's very difficult not to see it from both sides. You're always trying to well, maybe if we don't do this, maybe we save some money, or and I think that the best work that I've ever done, I think, and that with teams that I work with, always have something in common, which is that I always try not to curtail myself as to whether we were, okay, this is enough. Like, it's never enough, right? Like, I think that art is abandoned, is not finished, right? And I think that it's that ability to be able to keep it, just keep going until you can't do it anymore, that are pulling you out of the computer or the room, and that's when you finish, because you can't simply go any further, but not because you think you're done. And I think that
that's right.
And that I think it's something that you learn. Some people have it innately, and that's wonderful. Most of us, I think, learn it. And I think
and if you don't have the passion and the drive and the love for what you're doing, so that you can actually do that and not think twice about it, if you can't be sitting and doing what you're doing for 12 hours a day and wow, where did that day go? Then do something else. Do something that you do love, because you can't learn how to be that passionate about what you do. And God, the years go by fast, and if you find yourself a few years down the road doing something you didn't like, it really sucks. So,
yes.
I mean, love what you're doing. Be very focused on it. The earlier and the sooner you find what it is you love, and you can focus on it, and you can pursue that, it's like an investment. You're making an investment in your career. And if you're going to be an animator, or you're going to be a compositor, or you're going to be a texture artist, or a map painter, or whatever it is you're going to do, the sooner you hone in on what that is and can begin getting your skills and your toolbox together and your experience together, the better off it's going to be. Because if you spend a few years at this and then spend a few years at that, and you know, every time you change course, you're going to be moving to a bottom rung. So, you know, be careful about how you invest your time. Don't think, oh, well, you know, I got this gig. I don't really want to do it, but it's a gig. And, you know, because you'll have those opportunities, and the next thing you know, you're making a good living, and all right, well, this job sucks, but I'm going to buy a car, so that's okay. And you know, and then the other thing is network. I mean, this is all a very elaborate networking opportunity. You know, we got together, maybe we'll work together. Aladino and I have worked together. I work with Tim's
We worked in the same show.
compatriots. You know, we all, you know,
Will
we'll
anyone call
go to
me?
Burning Man together
There-
next year.
I've been talking to them about Burning Man
So,
this whole
you know,
evening.
but you know, everyone you meet, make sure you make a note of it. You write down who they are, what they like, what their favorite flavor is, and stay in touch with them. And then ask them who their favorite 3 people are that, you know, might be able to be introduced to you, or, you know, chase them down. I mean, it's all about
That's
networking.
really, I think that's a great piece of advice, because in my business, you know, a lot of times we're always trying to find the next client and the next show. And, you know, I have people saying, oh, we should get a salesperson. I go, the problem with a salesperson in business is it's all about relationships, and it's about actually working with people one-on-one with them. And a salesperson typically hasn't done that. So a producer who has worked with another producer, supervise, it's all about a relationship that you gain and trust between the 2 people, because there's art involved, there's money involved, there's a lot of things involved to make this craft really great. And it's all about the people and connecting with them.
Yeah, and I will add one thing to consider that you guys are in school and probably learning lots of different softwares, and the tools are irrelevant, in my opinion. I mean, I think that the specifics of what you're learning, whether it's Maya or Modo or ZBrush or Nuke, doesn't matter, because in 5 years it'll be something different. So I think that what's most important is to figure out what you want to do visually, if that's what you're trying to do, and do the best you can with the tools you have at that moment, but don't get enamored by the tools, because otherwise, again, you become an operator. And although we all need lots of operators, and you know, every studio will have lots of people that you tell them every time what you want them to do, the people that rise to the surface are the ones that come and show you what they want to do, and you agree with them. And I think that comes from being passionate about what you do, and trying to figure out new ways of doing things without getting bogged down by the tech details, because, again, that changes all the time.
Absolutely.
All the time.
And some of the best artists that I've ever known, they adapt. They're constantly looking for like the next best piece of software. So they're never just stuck on that piece of software.
And in
they
fact,
want to do the next best cool thing.
And in fact, that's why I always, you know, when I've given talks like this before, and I always say, you know, one of the best things you can do is, if you want to be in the visual effects industry, pick up photography. You know, like don't, you know, look at art as a general concept rather than a specific one, because, you know, again, I started architecture first, right? And I've worked with tons of ex-architects, because it's a similar part of your brain that gets used. And people that come from the fine arts, from painting, from sculpture, from photography, all those things educate the way you do visual effects work, and it's what makes you different than someone who's only in the visual effects because they think visual effects are cool, right? Because it's, you know, no, and it's amazing, and you know, but to me, it's, you know, and I'm a director as well, and I see it. I try to look at it that way. It's a wonderful tool to get something done. It's not the mean of it itself. It's something that allows me to do, you know, certain work that I couldn't do otherwise. And I think that that's what's amazing about our industry, which is something that and also it's becoming easier. You know, the powerful, you know, what you can do at home with a $5,000, $4,000, $2,000 computer and $2,000 worth of software, it's amazing. When I started, you know, you needed to buy a $75,000 computer and spend another $50,000 in software, and you know, it was impossible for someone who didn't have a job or were just starting. So, again, think of it as a means to an end rather than an end to itself.
It's not the truck. It's the driver.
It's the driver.
And you don't need a Canon 5D Mark VI to take the most amazing pictures.
Phone.
If you've got a good eye,
Yeah.
you can take it on your iPhone. I mean, and just think and be aware of what it is you're doing. I can't tell you how many times I'll get 2 shots back that cut together, and they're basically the same shot, but they look different. And the artist will be like, well, I used the same settings. It's the exact same settings. Yeah, but the lighting was different in the scene. So you gotta, consider how that has an impact, because even though it was shot at the same time, the sun went behind a cloud. It's a little bit later in the day. It's, you can't rely on your software.
And is VES, the Visual Effects Society, a good thing to join, or is it after they've been in the business for a while?
Well, you can't really join if you haven't been in the business for a while.
I think you need credits.
Yeah, you need credits.
Oh, okay.
And you need sponsorships.
But
Okay.
they have events.
But they-
and
yeah.
Do
you
they
can
have
go
free
to the
events for
and
the-
you can
okay.
schmooze
They have
with
events.
guys like
Yeah,
us.
I mean, you should. I mean, you can buy their magazine. Actually, the VS magazine is. I'm thinking of Cinefx actually, because that's another. I've been subscribed to Cinefx for like 25 years, and I don't know if you've seen it. It's this little square magazine, and you can get an enlargement or just.
And
subscribe.
VES just came out with their
Yeah,
first
VS
magazine,
just started
yeah.
having a magazine,
Yeah.
which is great. But the Cinefx, it's always been a Bible for me because they take like 4 movies every 2-3 months, and they do extensive research, and they interview all the supervisors and the producers. And if you're trying to learn techniques and tricks of the trade, I think that is a wonderful resource. Yeah, and then watch a lot of movies, man. I mean, movies on TV and.
Yeah, I also think people are, if there's somebody you admire or a show that you want to work on or a company you want to work with, I think people are a lot more accessible than people think
I agree.
they are. I'm just amazed how much people just give up before even trying.
Yeah.
And I think when people have finally reached myself or reached other people to ask for jobs or favors, I'm always there to sort of maybe not always have the job, but I always have an ear for people. And I think there's a lot of people out there that have an ear and will absolutely discuss things with you. So,
Yeah, absolutely.
It's true, for sure. You're looking for advice. You're not looking for a job.
Yes.
You're not looking for a handout. You're looking for advice. There's not anyone in the world in this business, no matter how fabulous or celebrated or amazing they think they are, that doesn't love someone saying, hey, can I have your advice? Just sit down and talk about what's a good way to,
That's why we're here.
bust into the business. You can get 1,000 people calling a day looking for a job, and then it's, pain in the ass, I just want a job. Oh, you want advice? Yes, well, I have wisdom to share.
And then the other thing I wanted to add is there's an event called the VFX Bake Off, and it happens every January. It's free to the public. It's when all of the semi-finalists, visual effects teams who are in contention for Oscars present a 10-minute clip and talk about, what their biggest challenges were and how they overcame them. And it's really fascinating. It's
Yeah,
really
it is.
fascinating, and
Really
you
cool.
learn a lot. And there's a ton of visual effects people there that you can come, and they're all getting drunk.
I was going to
So-
say,
That's right.
if you can
They're-
scam
yeah.
your way into the party that happens
Yeah, so
beforehand,
they'll be a lot more accessible.
you can get wasted with them. You buy people drinks, nobody will say no to a drink.
So I wanted to, at this point, open the floor to questions. I'm sure you guys have lots of them. And I think is there a mic floating around? Who is the keeper of the mic? Okay. Is that Lynette? Or
Yes, it's
okay.
Lynette, yeah. Okay, first
so-
question right here.
Hi, my name's Tish. I'm from the Rochester Institute of Technology. Earlier you said that you don't abandon your art, it's just never finished, and the limitations could be technological limitations. So in the same vein, it said that art influences technology, and green screening, and to a greater extent, rotoscoping is a very archaic form of segregating shots. With something like light field technology, where a camera also takes in depth information on top of the RGB information, so you can roto based on depth, how do you see that influencing the pipeline of VFX in live action shots? And I'm asking because I'm one of those people that are constantly obsessing about how to work smarter, not harder.
Yeah, I'll talk a little bit about that. In fact, I agree wholeheartedly. I mean, I think that green screen, blue screen, whatever you want to call it, a process screen, for lack of a better description, it's a pain in the butt and it's antiquated, and yet we can't not work without it because there's no better alternative at the moment. But I've done some tests with the Lightro, for instance, cameras. Yeah, and I think that, I don't think, it's not there yet, but I think that eventually you'll be able to do that. I think that eventually you'll be able to shoot and get depth information in real time to be able to separate it. It ain't there yet, but I think it's just a matter of time. And it's going to make it both easier and way more annoying because the more options you have, the harder it is to work with clients, right? And I look at Steve. No, because the more access to options, I think. Let me start it from another angle. I think constraints sometimes are great when you're an artist because it gives you a box to play with, right? Sometimes I've done a lot of game cinematic work, for instance, and many times I've done it with rendering with a game engine. And what I love about that is that, well, it looks like the game. I don't have to invent that, so that frees me from having to come up with a specific look and just concentrate on storytelling and performance, which I find very satisfying. So in the case of something like green screen and Lightro and stuff like that, I think that eventually it will make it easier from a purely technical standpoint, but I don't know if it's going to make it easier to tell stories. So, you know what I mean? Like, I'm not sure about that yet.
Did anyone else want to add to it, or are you
all I know is
uncustomarily silent?
For the last 20 years, I've been hearing about how there's going to be a new program out that's going to make rotoscope easy, and they're all still sitting on the box of rotoscope.
And in fact, with the advent of digital television, it's actually made it a little harder for us because there's so many different cameras, and every bloody camera works in a different color space. And some cameras treat better, blue screen than green screen, and vice versa. And then you take the red and the blue screen channel and the blue channel, and dealing with noise and stuff like that. So it used to be a little simpler. You shoot with a film and then scan it, and you're good to go.
And also, I would add, it seems like every DP thinks they know how to shoot visual effects. And so I think it's just becoming more common. So a lot of times, we're getting things that just aren't shot properly either because they don't have a visual effects supervisor on set supervising it. So some of the advances are actually bringing us backwards.
Yeah, which, by the way, it's another good point about entering the industry. One thing that I found over the years that it's been very useful for me as an artist, but also with people that I work with, is people that actually have on-set experience. Because knowing how to do something in the computer is one thing, and it's very valuable, of course. But also knowing how to shoot something so you can then do something in the computer is doubly useful. And I think that not many people have experience with that, and I think that doing little films with friends, and if you're in school, if you do film projects or whatever, try to get immersed as much as you can in the nitty-gritty of the shoot. Because, like he says, the shoot can make or break your life. If something is not shot properly,
Absolutely.
if something is not shot properly, you're dead.
And you may not even recognize it, which is why your point of learning photography is so valuable, because you can look at something. How many times do you look at something? How many times have we heard a client say, there's just something. I don't know what it is. It just sucks, And a lot of time, it's because it's not lit well, it's not integrated properly. I mean, we spend an insane amount of time. You have this beautiful photographic backdrop, and then we put somebody in front of a green screen and have to set them in that photographic backdrop. You need to light it in a way. We're putting Danny on top of a motion base in front of a green screen, and a DP that understands what the light is going to do when we bank this way, and when the wings come up and block the sun, because, and if you don't have that proper balance. You know, if the wings go up and the sun is blocked and yet she's still bright, it's not going to work. And you know,
from a technology standpoint, I think that's the most impressive thing that I've seen, and it's been a few years already, but the way they shot Gravity, because they had, I don't know if you've ever seen the how-tos for Gravity, but you know, they had this automotive robot moving her around, but they had essentially a box made out of, I don't know, 50,000 LEDs. So they would do pre-renders of the scenes where she would be in, and then they would essentially project the stuff from the LED box. So her lighting was interactive with the CG that was going to be created later. So the lighting is impressive in that movie from a purely technical standpoint. And excuse my friend, we bitch about what he was talking about all the time. No one knows how to shoot green screen still, because they put the key a rim and it's like, well, but that doesn't, there's no sun. Like, where do you have a key light? Like it's, oh, we needed that to make sure the contrast is like, yeah, don't do that. So again, like what he said about photography is paramount. Like, learn to understand why an image looks good, and once you do that, you can try to replicate it in visual effects.
And you don't need to fill every corner of the frame with something brilliant either. It's like the old map painters who painted on glass would give you a point of view and a focal point, and the rest of it could be all fuzzy. It doesn't matter. And there are some who are so obsessive by every frame, every pixel. Let's like gamma up on the blue channel and see what's happening over there. Well, but what's happening is over here. We do so often. We'll have a scene where, two people are talking to each other, and off in the corner is a little something that, is that a building? That's modern. We live in a different world. How could I'm like, if you're looking over there, you're looking at right. then the director completely fucked up the scene.
That's for the VR folks. So we have a person waiting very patiently up front for his question.
Thanks, guys. Fascinating stuff. I had a question about the crowd simulation, especially for big scenes like Bob in Game of Thrones or Black Sails, the challenges and how you went about solving those.
Well, as a producer and not being on the box, I haven't a clue. But, so I'll let Aladino speak to that. But ultimately, we shoot as many photographed elements as we possibly can. So everything that's going to be between you and the camera, we try and photograph so that when we're doing simulations, it's all happening out there. Now, sometimes that's not entirely possible, and we're working on a shot now where we're sort of over the back of a Dothraki hordeman in the foreground riding into maybe a battle. And, the folks who are building this character in CG are just completely blowing my mind because you would never know. And the tools that are used to execute that, Aladino can speak to.
Yeah, I mean, there's obviously lots of different tools right now. I mean, in its day, Massive, obviously, created by Weta was the thing, but now there's MiArmy or MyArmy, however you say it, and there's another one that I can't for the life of me remember the name that we use at DD. In the end, before I go into that, like what he said is absolutely right. If you can shoot it, shoot it. There's no replacement for reality yet, in my opinion. So I think that shooting elements will always help a visual effects heavy shot look better. But to the specifics of crowd simulations, I mean, what I've seen is over the last few years is that they simply get, they've gotten more sophisticated and more powerful and faster to deal with. I mean, the main thing that for me has always been a pain in the butt with crowds is that it's glacial. I mean, it's very difficult to art direct, and I don't sit in the box and do the crowd sim. So to me, I'm less interested in the tech. I'm more in the in what comes out. You know what I mean? But we've done some things in the last, in the last, especially the last year with MiArmy. Is it MiArmy or MyArmy? But
it is now.
It is now. That we did for Power Rangers, actually, which we finished a few months ago. And I was very impressed with that. The speed of interactivity with the artist, and when you're standing next to them or sitting with them and working on something was very impressive, like much faster than I've ever seen. But we've also done things in more kind of a trick way. For instance, when, I've done lots of like stadiums, for instance, and we've done things with Nuke, with, particles in Nuke, and then having, a little, we would go and shoot people and have, I don't know, 150 different people doing this, and then we would randomize it in Nuke and use it as a backdrop. And like he was saying before, you use the tricks of the trade, photographically speaking, to make sure that your attention is where it needs to be. And then you put a little smoke, and I always joke, like, when in doubt, put smoke and flares. Like.
And mammoths. Don't forget the mammoths.
But for your crowd sims, very important if you've got people doing particular things, whether it's fighting or running or doing a Maori war dance, whatever it is, shoot people doing it. So that you have a reference of what it really looks like, and make sure you shoot textures for everybody, because you can dress up 100 people and shoot T-poses and do photogrammetry scans very quickly. You can move 200 people through a photogrammetry booth in a day, and then you've got virtually everything you could ever want in terms of the assets to then go and do a crowd simulation and have everything you need.
Yeah. In fact, when it comes to crowds, I think that one of the biggest secrets is it's variety and randomization. Your eye is keenly aware of patterns. We very quickly can catch patterns on an image, right? So it's super, you're very fast at catching two people doing the same thing.
Duplication.
Right.
Bad.
So it's the more you can randomize, the more your brain can quite catch it, and it becomes crowd. And that's what's important when you're trying to do crowd sims.
Yeah, I remember once we were working on a show, and they had only shot, I think, 2 tiles for a whole audience. And unfortunately, there was a guy in this green, and he was doing kind of a strange movement, so he got multiplied over, and then that's all you saw was this guy in the green all over the audience. So yeah, it definitely needs random. Yeah, definitely.
Does anyone have any other questions?
This one back there.
Okay.
I see a hand.
Second row there.
All right.
Second row.
Is there another hand over there?
Hi. So with certain techniques that are new, or at least haven't been done in television, like the twins effect in American Horror Story, do you have a lot of time to R&D different approaches to it, or do you really just go with the tried and tested methods and just try and make them work?
Yeah, for that case, Jason Piccioni, who was our visual effects supervisor, we had a couple months to actually think through the process. We shot tests, and then we actually did some compositing tests as well that Ryan Murphy and the producers could take a look at. And this seemed to be the best method. We had actually used one where it had some sort of apparatus with sort of like this tracking ball on it, but it ended up being more of a hassle to remove. So we got rid of that pretty quickly. So yeah, you learn kind of what works. Then you have your artist take a look at it, and you run tests through, and then you give them to the client, and they take a look at it. So it's collaborative. So luckily, we had time in that case.
Are there conjoined twins that you researched, met, talked
Yeah, no,
to?
that's actually a good point. Yes, there are conjoined twins. A lot of it was photographs. So there were some that we were actually able to view some videos. It's a challenge, though. I mean, Ryan Murphy would bring up sort of what bothered him about certain techniques and what he wanted to see and how the muscle moved down here, because that was a case where if anything slid strangely, it was immediately noticed. Because you think about your chest muscles moving across there, it creates a huge challenge. So there were a few shots that proved to be really, really difficult to make work. A lot of sort of warping, and sometimes we introduce some CG elements as well.
Yeah. Those shows actually where you have to do extensive research and R&D are the most fun. I think that after you've been in the industry for a while, when you do stuff that you've done before, although it's always, you always try to find a way to put your own input on something that you're doing. When you're faced with something you've never done before, I still get giddy, even though I have no clue how I'm going to do it. Black Sails being the example, when we were bidding the hurricane sequence, I sincerely had no clue how we were going to do it. And I mean, you have an idea, yeah, sure, we're going to use Houdini, fine, but it's, from a purely visual, I don't know how we're going to do this. And, it's having a good team and good collaborators and really being able to listen and try to help the process in the best way you can. And even though I used to do a lot of on-the-box work, I'm surrounded by people that are infinitely more talented than I am doing that. So my job is to step back and look at and ask for things and try to guide it, right? So I think that that's always very satisfying to this day. I mean, again, it's what you haven't done before that keeps you happy with what you do.
We did a gag where a couple of seasons ago, Dragon drops down in a Roman amphitheater and has to go rah and blast 20 people, pick up a guy and eat him. And we're sitting around brainstorming, how are we going to do this? And my supervisor goes, well, we're just going to do it for real. Huh? He says, we'll animate the dragon, we'll translate the animation to a motion control crane, we'll put a flamethrower on it, we'll bring 20 guys out who are stunties, and we'll go blast them with a flamethrower. And I was like, wow. It's and then you start making phone calls, and you're like, hey, Panavision, would you mind putting a flamethrower on a techno dolly? And they were like, wow, bitchin'. And then
you know what? You don't have to go to Burning Man now. That's what it's like.
Well, there you go. There you go. And then, you talk to the special effects guy, and he's like, how do you feel about this? And then the stunt guy is like, hey, can we light 20 of your people up on fire in a single go? And then you bring it to the producer who says, are you out of your fucking mind? But ultimately, there's a variety of reasons why that ultimately proved to be the best way to do it. Number one, it was safer because the trajectory of the fire, assuming we were going to use real fire, was so predictable because it was robotic and it was exactly the same performance every single time. So the stunties knew when they hit their mark exactly at what point they were going to get blasted, and so there was nothing left to chance there. From a visual perspective, it was a photographed element that we could actually use to stick in the mouth of a dragon, and we had, the hardest part of the scene was now in camera, and now we could concentrate our efforts on the rest of it. And if you can sell, sleight of hand, if you could sell a little bit of that, really, it goes a long way to making the rest of your picture look completely authentic.
Yeah.
So we have exactly 3 minutes left before the streaming police come and shut everything down. Do you want to just mention what you're doing next?
I think that she had another question.
Yeah, we have time for a
We
couple.
have time.
We started a little late, so we'll honor
Lynette,
it.
is it a hard out, or do
It's not a hard out, no. We started a little late, so we can honor
In
that.
that case,
bring it.
never mind.
So
Go
next,
on, let's keep going.
Next question's here.
Espressos for everybody.
All right, I'm going to ask another one. I'm assuming in a studio of your size, you have collaborative platforms that each of you use, so like Shotgun for Nuke, and Foundry, because they're no longer the Foundry, just announced Elara, which is cloud-based platform for compositing. So with stuff like this, how do you see it affecting physical studios? Do you see the studio size getting smaller, more dispersed? How do you see that affecting it 5 years from now?
I think you're actually going to see a variety of studios. It's interesting because we actually created our own software system, our own pipeline. That's actually based on FileMaker, as old as it sounds. It actually, in 2008, we started creating that. We have a full-time pipeline that helps us deliver our shots, not only bid all of our shots, but actually track it throughout the facility and give all the notes, and then deliver it to the client. I also see smaller facilities. I mean, we're probably a medium-sized facility. There's much, much larger facilities than our own. But I think visual effects are a lot more accessible now. I see independent visual effects supervisors that sort of act as their own studio. They have artists all over the world, and they kind of just disperse work. The work all comes back to the visual effects supervisor, and then they're able to actually present it to the client. I don't think there's a right way or a wrong way. I think for certain shows, it makes sense to go to a facility like ours because we can throw a lot of firepower at it and get things done quickly. However, I think for many shows, it all comes down to relationships and the visual effects supervisors that they have relationships with, and they've created a great system using Shotgun or whatever they use to track. So I don't think there's an easy answer to that. I don't think it's necessarily going to be smaller or larger. I think they're all going to coexist.
Ultimately, it's just tools.
Yeah.
And as Aladino said, it's a way to get a job done. And if this year's tool is a cloud-based blah, great. If next year's tool is a suitcase-based, you know. I mean, we have vendors all around the world, and everybody works in their own particular way. Some are sharing shots, others are, you know, I've got giant mega facilities you've heard of, and I've got, you know, single guys and gals working in their garages in far-flung parts of the world. You know, it's everybody's doing their own thing, and
it's
you know,
talent.
Yeah.
You're going to where there's talent.
Who's driving the truck?
Yeah,
Sure.
I mean, you know, between Shotgun and NIM, you know, things like NIM and stuff, there's a little bit of, you know, there's a better letter opener. I mean, if it helps your particular pipeline be more efficient, sweet.
File maker in
yeah,
Excel.
I mean, I think that they can become a bit cumbersome as well. I mean, you know, DD obviously is huge. I mean, we have, I don't know, 1,300 people or something between the multiple facilities, and we need a system to track stuff. But we found that, you know, it often happens that you know, something like Shotgun, when taken to the extreme, can be too complicated, and it can be too customizable, and you know, sometimes it's like I wish it would just have two options and you can just track things that way. But you know, to his point, I mean, if you're a small studio and there's 5 people, you don't need Shotgun, really. I mean, you know, but if you have 1,200, well, sort of. I mean, otherwise it becomes really complicated to do feature film work when you're doing 1,000 shots. You know, tracking, you know, all these people doing all these different things at the same time. So I think, you know, project management tools are a necessary evil, in my opinion. But I don't know if there's a better way. I'm sure the cloud-based will be fine one day, and then 2 years later it'll be something better. I mean, people keep thinking about better ways of doing stuff. So.
I mean, consider your clients. Who are your clients likely to be? If you're looking to work at big visual effects facilities, you need to know what the tools are. If you're going to be a one-person shop on your own, doing your own thing, then, you know, what your toolkit is will only come into play when I say, I need you to share what you're doing with somebody else. Oh, wait, you're using what? You know, so if you're a compositor, pretty much now you're using Nuke.
Right.
It used to be not that way. You could have been using a variety of tools. So, you know, consider where it is you want to be and what tools they're using. You know, as a project manager, a couple of years ago, the studio started wanting productions to be working with Shotgun as a means of tracking so that they could dial into it and see what you're doing. But it's such a cumbersome, impossible tool for a guy like me. But for a facility, or if you know how to drive it, you know, it's fine. But, you know, again, it's all about who's driving it. It's not what you're driving.
Yeah, and I think really when it comes down to it, it's just the process has to be easy for the client. I mean, visual effects are hard enough, so whatever tool you use, it should just make it easier for the client. They shouldn't have to be worrying about the technicalities of that. They should just be concentrating on the end artistic product.
Yeah. And for your team, you know, I mean, if you're supervising a team and your people are spending, a fifth of their day figuring out how to enter things in Shotgun, you're wasting your money there. Yeah. So it's again, I think it's a necessary evil when you're doing really big projects. But I find that something like Shotgun works best when I use it to a minimum. Like I enter notes and I that's it. And I try not to use it, because it can be so infinitely customizable that I think is a hindrance, Anyway, but that's just me.
There's a question.
Anybody
here.
else?
There's just one right here.
Yeah.
As creative, we struggle with a lot of creative burnout from just obsessing over details and just kind of working ourselves to the bone. Can you guys give examples of a particular body of work that you go to and are still kind of blown away with and just...
Wait, I didn't hear that. Can you
I'm
repeat
sorry.
that? 'Cause the door.
That's okay.
What inspires you that keeps
Oh, what
you from
inspires?
burnout?
Yeah, like a body of work, whether it is a painter or it is a digital artist. Can you give an example so that something that we could take a look at?
The bake-off that Sue was referencing earlier, you go and see a body of work that, 10 visual effects supervisors have come up with, and it will blow your mind, and you'll come out of that feeling like, yes, what can I embrace next, you know?
I find that I'm much more inspired by kind of minimal use of visual effects, but when it's in, in service of a story. Like in the last few years, for instance, I thought that Ex Machina was amazing, for instance. I thought that it was a very elegant use of minimal visual effects, something like Arrival. Obviously there's visual effects, but it was used in a very elegant way and always in the service of story, which I think it's very important to me. I mean, obviously, when you look at something like Transformers, it's awesome, right? But it's like, and no disrespect to the people that do it. Obviously, it's a lot of work and it's amazing, right? But it's not what I get inspired by.
Yeah, and I find myself, whenever I go to features, I'm constantly distracted. I'm looking at the screen at visual effects. And things like, Star Wars, that was...
Rogue One?
Yeah. You get inspired by that, but then you look at also the George Lucas one where it was shot entirely in front of a green screen. And I found it, it should inspire me as being in visual effects, but I actually found it to be kind of disheartening and distracting.
I think that's a great example of the tool for the tool's sake. It's like, let's do as most visual effects, the most visual effects shots ever. And as a viewer, and that's something that happens to anyone who's in the industry for long enough. It's really hard to go to the movies, right? Because you're inevitably it's hard to pull yourself back and just look at a story. And that's why the movies that are very successful at doing that, when you forget, like, okay, another example. Did you see Birdman? Iñárritu's? Yeah. Okay. I remember that when I saw it, and I had a screener, so I was watching it, for the Oscars season and whatnot. And I'm watching it with my wife, and 5 minutes go by, and I'm like, and I stop and like, wait a minute, they haven't cut yet. So then we play again, and we keep going. Another 2 minutes, 3 minutes, 4 minutes. Like, whoa, okay, stop, rewind, and then I'm like, holy shit, they haven't cut. So then I play it, and then something happened which blew my mind. And about 20 minutes in, I completely forgot that they were not cutting, and the story took over. And that's the type of stuff that inspires me. Whether I am able to do something like that or not is completely beside the point. I wish, But it's when we as filmmakers and storytellers are able to use the tools that are available to us in order to make the story better.
That is the most important point of the night.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Ba-dum-bum.
No, I mean, it's got to be in the service of the story.
Yeah, it does.
Because it's not about spectacle. I mean, there is so much out there that is about spectacle, and which is not to say a shot can't be spectacular, but if it isn't furthering, advancing, telling the story, engaging the viewer on an emotional level, then it's pointless. Yeah. It's just eye candy.
I remember many years ago when morphs were, and this is going back a bit, were popular, but there were so many shows that wanted to do morphs, and they were just so jarring. And it was just anything that's sort of a gimmick that any of our clients want to do, we just
Deep Space Nine.
Yeah, we just talk through it because it just doesn't look good.
Bullet time.
Yep.
Yeah, talk about something
Bullet
that's
time.
overused. Yeah.
Anybody else? Any more victims?
We'll take this one last question here.
Okay.
Hi, I'm a generalist at Imaginary Forces, and we make title sequences. Yeah.
Closer.
Oh, can you hear me?
Yeah, there we
There we go. So yeah, we make title sequences, and for the most part, we don't really have big budgets for title sequences. Luckily, we did with Black Sails, so we were able to make something really beautiful. But that's not always the case at all. So what kind of experience do you guys have with a really small team met with high expectations? And by small team, I mean we have 4 artists on staff. So we really have a lot to get through with a very short amount of people.
Yeah. Well, I mean, interestingly enough, at DD, sometimes I lead teams of, my producers here, my EP, Nicole. I mean, sometimes my teams are like 4 people, 5 people. I think at the end of the day is setting up it's not an expectations game. I hate calling it expectations game because inevitably you think that you're going to compromise, but it's how to treat your creative to the box that you're playing with, right? If you only have 4 people and you only have 3 weeks, then you have to be nimble to come up with the best thing you can do with those 4 people in 3 weeks. It's not a matter of doing something that could be done better crappily. It's doing something that one person would do crappily. So with 4, you do it like, amazing, right? So I think that experience teaches you what can and cannot be done in a certain amount of time. And that obviously helps. But at the same time, technology has grown to such a level, and it continues to grow and change, that with 4 people now, you can do things that were impossible just a handful of years ago. So I think, again, it's a matter of studying and trying to develop a style that fits your capabilities if you have a small team, Sorry. Yeah.
I agree. It's really all about the creative process. Sitting down and figuring out what can your 4 people do in that time frame and being realistic about it. Sure. I mean, some of the worst things is we walk in with clients and they want to do this much, the budget is this much, and the time is this much, and it's really talking them back and figuring out how to sort of bring everybody to the middle and figuring out what can we bring to the game for our client that's going to satisfy them. And also be realistic within the time frame.
Yeah.
There are tools that are better at doing certain things than others. There was a 3D tool. I don't even know if it's still around. Lightwave.
It is.
Okay. Lightwave. Oh my God. We did the most amazing stuff on Battlestar Galactica in Lightwave. Yeah. And it was 5 guys in a room and me saying, "Is that done yet?" And and then when a similar kind of need said, "Well, we're going to grow up, we're going to be big boys, we're going to use Maya, and we're going to use RenderMan to render it all," showing my age, but it was so sophisticated and beyond the scope and the capabilities of the people who were driving it. And I was just like, can't we go back to Lightwave? Because we'd be done by now, and it would be awesome. Yeah. And, you don't always have to bust out the laser beam to cut a piece of salami. Sometimes a knife is good. Yeah.
I mean, like sometimes you break out After Effects. I mean,
I use
a
it
lot
every
of
day.
people.
We use After Effects.
And there's nothing
every
wrong
day.
with After Effects. It's just everybody wants to use Nuke now. And the fact is After Effects has some better tools.
Likewise.
I use After Effects every day.
So it's don't discard.
Yeah, and also it's more impressive to push a tool to its limit than use something half-ass, right? Yeah. Like if you're a lot better using Lightwave or whatever, Max, and you can do something amazing, but you're only mediocre in Maya, well, forget Maya, right? Like why? We as soups or creatives will be much more impressive with something that you did in stop motion in your kitchen with matchsticks, if it's amazing, than if you do something crappily in Maya, because I'm like, well, I know what you can do in Maya, and this is not good. But if you again, you have to be able to show your creativity in the best possible way and to recognize what that way is. And also, very importantly, when you work with teams, is to be able to be humble and listen, and that takes practice, because, many of us are type A personalities, and, we like to take control of the process, but, it takes years to learn to try not to do that, or at least only to do it when it's absolutely necessary, and make sure that you let the people that are better than you do their thing, because everybody benefits, right? So and that's something that takes years to, I'm still learning to do that, actually. But it's a very good lesson.
Okay.
Awesome.
Do we have time for them to wrap up, or are we getting on the late side?
Did
Lynette's
you-
the time cop here.
Well, that was the last question, but did you want to ask one more question yourself, or?
I was just going to say, just if you wanted to plug an upcoming project that you're doing, or have final thoughts on what we've been talking about.
Game of Thrones.
I'm opening the floor for whatever you want to say.
I just want to plug my partner Reza, who is here, who is the, we work 8 trillion hours a week, and we don't often get to see the people that we love, and you have to kind of keep it real, and that's your family is what it's all about. So the work is important, and my niece Nikki is here as well.
Props to Reza.
And having the support of the people that you love and supporting the people that you love, including the crew that you're working with, means more than any one project. I've got a team that I work with, most of whom have been together for years. We're now in my 7th year of this adventure, and a lot of the people that I work with are with me, and they've become a family. And when you can do what you love and do it with people who become your family, that's the greatest blessing any of us could hope for. So,
Indeed.
Aladino, pearls of wisdom.
We gotta top that now.
No pressure.
What he said. Yeah, no, I think that we touched about a little bit about it on this thing, but I think that, again, is try not to settle when you're doing visual work and as an artist. The most important thing is to be excited by what you do. The moment it becomes routine, you lose your edge. Some people have harder times. Like I'm horrible, for instance, at being idle. Like I'm not the type of person that when I don't have a job, I can be learning new software. Like I admire people that can do that. I need a goal. So when you don't have a goal, make one, and then you can try to push yourself. And again, like someone was asking before about what inspires you. Try to study what inspires you, and try to figure out how to put your imprint on the things that you do, because that's what kind of separates the many thousands of artists in the industry from the really good people. And those really good people rise to the surface rather easily. And I think that it's almost like a survival of the fittest. Those are the people who end up doing the type of work that we talk about. And I think that that's what inspires, the likes of me. And go home to your family, and that. Thank God for supporting partners and wives and husbands and boyfriends and girlfriends, because otherwise we'd be all single, and it's yeah, it's a good thing.
Well, cats count.
Cats, yes. I don't know, my cats are bastards. So
The thing I would leave all of you with is one thing I've learned with starting up a facility. It's really about all of you. It's about the people that work at the facility, and one thing I've learned is to show great appreciation for the people that make the difference in my company, and you should expect nothing less from any company or anybody you work for. They should appreciate you. I think in the visual effects business, there's too many people have gotten used to not being appreciated, being worked and overworked. Love what you do, but don't compromise on who you're working for.
Yeah.
And make that known. And make yourself known to the people that are in charge. Don't be afraid to approach them. I'm constantly amazed how many times people don't just approach me and say, Tim, this is what I want to do in the company. This is where I want to be. If people would just say that to me, I'm here to help.
Yeah.
You know, people are here to help. We're all just human. We all just want people to be happy, and if you're happy, I'm happy, and the company's happy, and the work is usually much better.
Yeah.
So.
And to his point, we are all artists, and we are all, I speak for myself, but very insecure artists, and it's no, it's to his point. I often try to go out of my way to make sure that people that work with me feel appreciated, because I like people doing that to me. Yep. Because as a director, I pitch all the time, and for every 20 projects I pitch, I get one, right? And the other 19 are like stabs to the heart because they don't love me, right? So it's, when as an artist, you put your art out there for people to have an opinion. So it's very important, and often you don't get back what you want, and it can be crushing, right? So it's very important when you work with a team, like he says, to make sure that your team understands their value, and understands what they bring to the table, and that, they know that you know what they're doing, but at the same time, guide, you have to make sure to find a way to gently guide the process to get what you want without alienating people and being an asshole, because no one wants to work with an asshole, at the end of the day. So, the mercurial, directors that yell at everybody, and it's like, yeah, some people are like that are amazing, but most people hate them, and no one wants to work with them, and what's the point of that? I think that it's a lot better to his point, Steve, about having a family. We spend more time at work than we spend with our families, right? So it's, your workmates become your family, and when you're able to form that kind of bond with the people that you work with is amazing, and it's important. You'll get what you give, right? So if you're a collaborative artist and you're nice to the people that you work with and you let them know that you appreciate, you get that back, and it makes everything a lot easier, way easier. Especially when it's like 3 o'clock in the morning on Saturday and you're at work.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
All right.
Anywho.
So thank you, everyone, for coming. You should be experts now and all have jobs by the end of the month. Okay?
Yeah. And I have some cards. Feel free to get some, I know that he brought some cards as well, and for DD, and again, be in touch. Again, we've hired a lot of people from Gnomon over the years, and I'm sure we'll continue to do so. So, I can share some. Yeah.
Thank you,
Awesome.
guys.
Round of
This was
applause,
really
everyone.
interesting. Thank you for coming.
Well done.
Interesting.